Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Today's episode is with Daniel Brisebois, who is a founding member of Tourne-Sol Cooperative farm outside of Montreal, Quebec. So this was a fun interview. You know, I keep saying that, but we just have awesome farmers on, and there are just so many awesome farmers in the community that we've been privileged to hang out with over the years. And I've been like, hey, I want to have you on the podcast, and they agree. So I feel incredibly lucky to have these awesome interviews, which frankly, guys, for me are just as much as fun to do as for you to listen to them, because I get to hang out, ask the questions. And then what you don't hear is between the recording, we actually always do a little bit more conversation. That's always fun too, and breaking down some things even further. So in this episode, Dan talked about the 3 types of farm stress and how he manages them, and why working on other farms as you start is so key for a great education. He also talks about his physical planning process that he does every single day that helps him set his day up for success, and how he structures his day, guys. Dan is a superhuman. He gets up at 4 o'clock every single day during the work week. I don't know if that's every day of the week or just during the work week, but I can guarantee that's true because he sent me an email this morning about this podcast episode at like 3:57 or something crazy like that. Maybe it was 4:30, but it's super early. He also talks about the big picture of farming a lot. And this is what I really like about Dan. He's been around for a while now. He's managed a large-scale farm, and he's taught a lot. So he kind of sees the common problems that farmers struggle with and some of the big picture thinking. And he treats it from the holistic view because he's gone through holistic training with their entire team. So I think there's a ton of value in this episode. I'm so excited that Dan agreed to come on. And also he talks about some of the farmer training stuff that he's doing in the future, which I'm super excited about as well, because I'm always up for learning. So I know that you're going to enjoy this episode. And also, if you haven't, check over on the thrivingfarmerpodcast.com website, because every episode go into the show notes. And so we'll take the resources that Dan talks about, put them in there, take the highlights of the episode, put them there as well. And in this particular episode, Dan talks about some varieties that are his favorites. We listed those there as well. So go ahead, have a listen. And if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and let us know what you think of the episode. Send me a DM, tell me your thoughts, and be sure to happy to respond to you there and learn more about you and your farm. All right, thanks for listening. So today's podcast guest is Daniel Brisebois from Tourne-Sol Farm outside of Montreal, Quebec. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I think I got your name mostly correct.
You did great.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of background of like your start and then kind of what you're focused on now?
All right. Yeah. So I don't come from a farm background, but we always had gardens growing up. I drove a lawn tractor. I kind of hated all that stuff. But in university, I studied agricultural engineering. And I did that because I was really interested in soil and water quality, not from the farming aspect of it. But while I was studying that during the year, I started working on farms during the summer, and I fell in love with it. I really loved all the work related to it. And I kind of realized I'd been doing that my whole life, but just not under the name farming. And I decided I really wanted to be a farmer rather than an engineer. And that's what I've done. And so in university, I'd met a group of people who wanted to be farmers. And so we worked together in school. We were roommates. I actually married one of them. And all of us decided at a certain point that we wanted to start our own farm and not make other people's mistakes, but start making our own mistakes. And so we started Tourne-Sol Farm. And that project, that was about 15 years ago. It was in the fall of 2004 that we started. And so we're still farming together.
Awesome. So talk to us a little bit about the cooperative model that you guys set up, because that's unusual and it seems that's worked really well for you guys over the years.
When we started the co-op model, we chose the co-op model sort of ideologically. We really liked the idea that it was sort of an egalitarian framework, but we didn't really know what that would entail. But down the line, we've really fallen in love with it. And it's a model where each person has one vote independent of the number of shares they have in the business. And that vote is specifically at the annual General Assemblies meeting to form a board of directors.
So as you have been farming, how has your role on the farm changed?
It's changed in a lot of ways. At the beginning, we grow vegetables and we grow seeds. The seeds was a very small part of the project, though it was like one of my deep passions. And so at the beginning, I was very involved with the vegetable business and all the growing and all of that. And over time, I've grown the seed business from, like 2 or 3% of our gross sales to about a third of our gross sales. And, within a couple of years, it's not impossible that we are selling more seeds than we are vegetables. And so with that growth, it's meant that my energy has, like at this point, I am no longer part of the vegetable team, and I lead a seed team. So we have a few staff that work with me specifically in all the seed aspects of growing, testing, packing, and marketing. So that's really been my evolution. In terms of the growing, I'm still very involved of the growing the seeds. But when it comes to the packing, we've packed about 60 or 70,000 packs this year, and I've probably packed like 2,000 or 3,000. It's our team that's done most of it, and I'm really more involved in the marketing and the communication with clients and the whole business end of stuff rather than the kind of the warehouse operations.
Very interesting. And you also do farmer education as well now.
I do. And it's actually, I've been doing this for a long time. About 10 years ago, I co-wrote a book called Crop Planning for Organic Vegetable Growers. And I co-wrote that with my co-farmer, Fred. And I've been blogging for about 10 years about farming and seed production at, I have a website, goingtoseed.net. So I've been doing that and giving workshops and speaking at conferences, about farm management, crop planning, seeds, and all that. But now I'm actually jumping into a new project that I call the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy. And so it's an online course that I'm planning that'll teach farmers sort of powerful spreadsheet functions and approaches, and that's going to let them guide their farm to profitability and quality of life. Spreadsheets have been a big part of our success in addition to many other factors. And so I think that a lot of farmers could benefit from this. And I think the first semester is probably going to focus more on crop production, the planning, record keeping, data analysis, making sure everything works together is smooth and easy. And later semesters are going to focus more on monitoring financials, budgets, integrating an online store to your spreadsheets. The sky's a little bit the limit.
Yeah, no, spreadsheets are incredibly important. And I couldn't run my life without them now. And when we work with farmers, we use so many spreadsheets. So I think that's going to be a really great resource for people.
I think so too, which is why I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I know we've had you do some trainings with us, with our small farm university. And a lot of it has been focused on that whole spreadsheet aspect of crop planning, which is so key.
It really is.
So let's talk about, you've been farming for a while now. You're still farming. Why do you farm? What's the draw to it for you?
At the basic, I think I farm because it completely engages me. I love everything that you do as a farmer because you really do everything. You're in the dirt, you're growing, you're watching life, but then you're also marketing, you talk to clients, you get to write, you get to do social media, and then you're also looking at numbers, and you get to work by yourself. You also get to be part of a team. And so being a farmer is the closest thing to being a Renaissance person that's possible these days. And myself, I like being engaged in all the capacities, so farming is perfect for that.
Absolutely. It's the Renaissance aspect, but you're still messing enough in the numbers and the business that you can keep that exciting side as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So sustainability, that's something that's always a big topic as well. What does a sustainable farm mean to you?
I think a sustainable farm is a farm that does not burn people out. It's a farm that fosters, a healthy workplace for the managers and the staff. And when you're farming, you have all the stresses and pressures that a traditional business has. You have to market. You have to understand your neighbors, your numbers, not your and your neighbors too, I guess.
Yes.
You have to understand your numbers, and you have to make your sales. So you have all of those stresses that all business people have. But then there's all this physical work that wears your body down. And especially on small farms, farmers who work on small farms, they treat themselves like machines, and they probably treat their BCS or their tractor better than they treat their own maintenance. And you combine that with the weather, the long days, these peak periods that are more than just August. Sometimes they last for months, and it just wears people down. And especially when you're not making the money that you would like to be making or that you need to make. And also when you have unclear processes and you're asking more from your team than maybe is reasonable. It's just all of that takes a toll on people. And if people burn out and choose to stop farming, and you don't have farmers, you won't have farming.
Yeah. So part of that whole education for farmers process is giving them the resources and tools to make sure that they are going to be profitable. Because if you're not profitable, you're going to burn out and stress out, and then we're not going to have farming anymore.
Yeah, and that's the first part. But I think the financial profitability, and it is important, but I think it's also the quality of life profitability that needs to be there. And that's something that a lot of farmers just don't have, or the way they treat their staff doesn't have it, and their staff doesn't come back.
Yeah. And we just actually did an interview yesterday with a couple, and they were just talking about how important it is to have those crew that comes back year after year after year.
Totally. That's the foundation of a good business.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a farmer, there are endless tasks to be done. What systems have you set up to ensure that you focus and tackle your most vital priorities each day?
So myself, I plan out my day in advance the evening before, and I use a journal to do that. I've kind of moved away from digital tools. I find being on paper has made it less distracting. And I try to be clear what my tasks really need me and what tasks I can hand to another person. So when I wake up in the morning, I know what I need to do. And something that I've noticed also is that when I'm at the farm, like physically at the farm at the same time as the people who are working with me, my task, especially as kind of a manager, becomes best how to support them. So that's often what I'm doing at the farm is like troubleshooting a bit, supporting people, putting out small fires, but not necessarily dealing with the priorities that are important for me. And so I need to carve out times of my day where I can just be alone with my brain. So I actually get up around 4 a.m. every morning, and that's a time that I can, my preference will be to work on content. Like if I'm going to do a newsletter, or I'm going to get together a meeting agenda or some kind of protocol, or look at or data. But like I have a couple hours that I can focus on. And then at 6 a.m., about half an hour before the kids get up, that's when I'll just go through my email and just try to get to inbox zero. And then you get to the farm, especially during the winter, I go to the farm just from 8 to noon, and I work with the team and, do troubleshooting and deal with what needs to happen. And then I go home, have a lunch, take a good nap, and then I'll work from home for a couple hours before the kids get home from school so that I can be uninterrupted there. In the summer, it's harder to get away in the afternoon. But what I find in the summer is because we're in the field more, there's less people in the office. So I can actually just make a point of leaving the office at a specific time and then being focused then.
What does your afternoon, evening, night look like?
Well, I guess that's another part of my system. Part of my systems is to know when work stops. So in general, once the kids are home, I try to put the farm to bed, and I become a family person at that point and put energy in them. I mean, there is times where it's like a couple weeks ago, we were wrapping up our 2018 financials, and there's like 4 days in a row that I was working till 9 or 10 at night, just like crunching the numbers and making it happen because like we had there's a deadline.
Yeah.
But I find usually those deadlines come from bad planning and problems you had before. So I would rather just plan my day that in the evening I can be, we cook supper, we eat, get the kids to sleep, tell stories, and then I try to go to bed as early as I can. So that's the flip side of it.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, because you're going to bed early, getting up early, working those first couple hours, just crunching stuff out, going to inbox zero at 6 a.m., which is awesome. I actually do that opposite. I do that at 4 p.m. I need the less brain power, hopefully, to deal with emails than like my content creation. No, that's great. That's very good. And I really love that you have laid that out and that you really try to stick to that. And the other thing you do is a nap. I think so few farmers do that every day, and taking that nap right after lunch, I think, can completely re-energize you for the second half of the day.
The nap is something that I'm kind of known for. I have a big piece of cardboard that I pull out in the office and put in one of the corners, and I will that's when I'm at the farm. If I'm at home, I just go to sleep in a bed. But I really make a priority for that so I can come back in and invigorated.
So as a farm, I'm sure over the years there's been some challenges that made you want to give up. Talk to us about how you made sure to stay motivated through the hard times.
I think there's like two big types of challenges that really are demoralizing. And the first relates to the fact that I co-manage with other people. And we all have different management styles and different expectations. And that is a strength in a lot of ways of the farm, but it also creates big disagreements at times. And they often come when we haven't talked things through, or we have ambiguous systems. So that's like one set of challenges that we have. And then the other challenge is when things kind of get out of hand, like especially related to growth. Like last year, like we have a seed rack program that we sell seed packets in nurseries and health food stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year we doubled the number of stores we were in from like 30 to 60.
Wow.
And it totally caught me off guard, some of the growing pains from that. Like we had these huge invoicing challenges. We weren't getting things shipped on time. We ran out of seeds. And this put a lot of pressure on myself and the whole team. Like it was a really stressful 2 months. And it was stressful that came from success. Not a stress that came from a bad thing, but it still was tough on everybody. And so I think both of these situations of like dealing with the team that's having a hard time having a common vision, and also dealing with the team that's stressed out by things changing, is that you get to a point where you're kind of beyond your current system's capacities. And so what I need to do at that time is to really stop and take a step back and to kind of like focus, what is it the big picture and where is it we should be going right now, and then break down what's happening and then figure out what our actual priorities are and if there's things we need to drop. And it's easy to say, it's sometimes harder to do in the moment, but it really has to take that backup vision or take a step back to have a better vision. And I think one of the biggest things is those things often come when you're feeling the busiest. And that's when I think it's the most important to actually not bring home work with me, like to respect the naps, respect eating full meals, seeing friends, spend good family time. And so that I'm able to recuperate so that I have a full brain at work. And with that kind of a fresh mind, it's easier to be objective and to really see what's supposed to happen. And I think it's important to talk about these challenges. So like to engage my staff in talking about what the problems are and like observe, not necessarily get caught up in the emotion, but observe what the problems are.
Yeah.
Talk to my co-farmers, talk to other farmers. Sometimes when we have the toughest times, I realize that talking to another farmer, they have a lot that they complain about, and you realize that you're not alone in your misery.
Yes. Or you just realize actually in the big scheme of things, how little of a problem it is that seems to have just become a mountain in your eye because of where you're looking at it from.
Totally. Yeah. And that vision is something to strive for. Other people I talk to kind of looking for the same thing is friends who work in other industries and realizing sometimes there's common things, or you kind of realize the advantages that you have. And of course, you have to talk to your wife. So I talked to Emily, my co-farmer. So it's not keeping things in. And that's without saying there's a spreadsheet for everything. But
yes.
But it's really distancing yourself from the business to have that objective perspective.
That's key right there. I mean, distancing yourself from the business, give yourself a 30,000 foot view so you can actually see what's really going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. We stand on the shoulders of giants, those farmers, those researchers who have gone before us. Tell us about the most influential lesson that you learned from one of your mentors and how it helped you become the farmer you are today.
So I've got a lot of mentors, so I'm going to kind of narrow it down.
Okay.
When I was starting farmer, so I'd been farming for, 4 or 5 years. I'd worked on farms, I'd managed on farms, I'd managed farms, and I had a pretty developed system of how I thought a farm should be. I knew what it should look like. In the summer of 2003, so this is a year before we started our farm, maybe summer 2004, but year before I started the farm, I worked on a farm called Orchard Hill Farm in Southern Ontario.
Okay.
And they were a market garden that worked with draft horses. And I chose to work there because, I had a lot of ecological ideas, and I thought if I never farm with horses, it'll always be a dream that I could have, what could have been. But then also, I had heard about their farm. They were producing about 100 CSA shares on 4 acres. And back then, 20 years ago, this was way more productive than other farms that we'd hear about. We're in a different space now, but at that time, it was phenomenal. And I had met some people who had worked there and just they loved it. So I went to work there, and I was going there to see the draft horses and see a solid farm, but I was pretty sure I knew what a farm was. And the farmers, Ken and Martha Lang, they just challenged me in so many frameworks. They didn't have a transplanter. Everything was planted by hand. And that was something that I had really moved away from in my visions. They didn't have a cold room. We harvested the evening before or the morning of pickup. They didn't have a delivery vehicle because all their CSA members came to the farm. We barely weeded, and they didn't really have any weeds. It was almost like a Nordell type system. And half the time on the farm, we were actually working in the pastures or baling hay. We weren't in the vet, which was what was paying the bills. And they were really succeeding. And they had a CSA retention rate of in the high 80s, if not low 90s. And so like I was just blown away by they were doing everything that I thought was wrong in some ways, and they were showing that it wasn't, and that it's not the system that matters. It's something that well designed and it works together that makes a farm successful. It's not just having a prototype that you repeat. And that's really influenced me. Nowadays, I don't think there's one way to farm. I think that you got to start with care and thought. And with that, you can build a great farm independent of scale. And I really learned that on that farm.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you. When we farmed, we were at about 15 acres. We were on scale. We made money. There's people out there that we work with that are doing a half acre that are, making good money full time. I just talked to people that are flower farming on large scale that are doing great. So you're right. There's not one system out there. But what I will say is knowing the system you're using, keeping on tweaking it, and back to your spreadsheets, knowing your numbers, knowing how it all plays together is incredibly important to make that system that you're using work for you.
Totally.
Very cool. So how has your farm changed over the years? I know you talked a little bit earlier about how your role has changed, because I feel like your farm is now a lot more mature, but it also sounds like your seed business is starting to become more mature as well. And so talk to us through that, a little bit of that journey.
We started our farm in the fall of 2004 with our first planting of the garlic in the ground, and then 2005 was our first growing season. And at the beginning, we were 5 farm managers, so the 5 friends that met in school and launched the business together, and we had no staff. Now, we'd all worked on farms at the beginning, so we had some experience. So in our first season, we did 110 CSA shares. We had a couple farmers markets, and the seed business was about $1,000 in seed contracts for other seed companies. And that first year, we grossed $75,000, and we were thrilled. It was a success.
Yeah.
Now we have, so this is 15 years later about. So now we have 13 people on the farm. There's 7 co-op members. So we've had 2 of our longer staff have joined us as co-op.
Okay. Wow.
We have 6 additional staff that work with us. Our farm has grown to about 500 CSA shares in terms of the veg business. And we have a very big online seed business and a seed rack program. And so at this point, our sales are about $700,000. So it's about almost 10 times what they were 15 years ago. And the veg business is kind of at a plateau. So now we're striving to produce the same, but reduce the labor to do that. And the seed business, though, is kind of the opposite in that we're trying to sell more with the same labor. And so now the place that we're at right now in our business is defining and making sure that there's a clear system for everything. We're writing protocols for all the tasks. We're, really making sure we're empowering our staff to do more than we would have in the past. And associated with this maturation has also had to really recognize that human resources or human relations is something that you have to put attention to, and really making sure that we treat our staff well. Not that we didn't treat them well in the past, but when we were 5 co-op members and 1 or 2 staff, it was easier to not be relying on them. But now we could not achieve what we're doing without them. And our success is really from the great people that we've worked with.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. And I know so many beginning farmers tend to look at those further down the journey and say, oh my gosh, I don't know why I'm not like them. But what they don't realize is that it's a process. It takes time, and that they will get there. It's just putting one foot in front of the other and going back to knowing what your numbers are, knowing what to focus on, and taking baby steps.
Yeah, those baby steps are important.
If there was a magic reset button as it relates to starting your farm, what systems would you go back and put into place sooner rather than later?
Well, I guess I would piggyback off kind of what I was just saying, is that I would sit down and write job descriptions for everybody very early on, as much the staff as our farm managers. And people need to know what their objectives are, and they need to know what's expected of them, and they need to know how much freedom and responsibility they have. And a lot of the conflicts that we've had have come down to, both in terms of between management and unclear expectations, has really come down to not having that clear. So writing those job descriptions early on would have, I think, helped us through. And I think related to that, also writing protocols and SOPs sooner would have helped us. And it really gets the whole team on the same page. And I think it would make it easier to train people in and to delegate. And I think that we could have grown a bit quicker in some ways had we done that, because it would have made us reflect on our processes as we were recording them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what I think that could have helped us the most. I mean, if I were to start a new farm tomorrow, I have a clear idea of what success would look like. And I would be able to lay out, like I know what equipment to buy, I know what investments to make.
Mm-hmm.
But to get to that point, I had to live through a whole lifetime of farming. And so I think it's important to make those mistakes and to go forward in a way that doesn't compromise your business and lets you get to that point where you do know what things should be.
So you're saying that part of the journey of farming is making those mistakes. You can't just manufacture a farm and be farming in 1 year, even if you buy all the toys and take all the courses and stuff.
Totally. Unless you've been farming before, but that's
yes.
But then that breaks the question.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I remember one time, this is actually the year that I interned at Polyface in Virginia. And so what I did that summer was really messed up to even think that I could do something like this. But the farm did survive. But I did come back once a month and I would do a farm walk with the entire crew. And I remember one time walking the field and looking at a planting of beets and saying, okay, guys, you need to get soybean meal, which we use for our nitrogen. I said, you need to apply it at this rate right now, because if not, in 2 weeks, we're going to have these issues. And someone was walking with me who had no farming experience. And they're like, oh my gosh, how did you know that? I said, well, because I've been doing it. A farmer who's only been doing that for a number of years is going to be able to catch that, just that slight yellowing and purpling of those leaves, to be able to see that that your nitrogen is having some issues.
Yeah. There's so much that we internalize. Like, this is really a craft that we're learning. And people too easily disregard how much goes into farming. It ultimately takes a lifetime to master, but if you were to be a doctor, you don't just learn that overnight. And it's the same thing to be a farmer.
Yeah, and it comes back to having healthy food is a key to keeping the doctor away. So
Totally. Yeah.
Yes. And with that, I'd like to stop here and take a break. We'll be back with Dan from Tourne-Sol Cooperative Farm in a minute. Hey, Michael here. I hope you are enjoying this episode so far. If you are looking to shave hours off your week and become a thriving farmer, you're going to want to head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources. There we have a resource bundle, which contains a bunch of different ebooks that we put together over the years on everything from winter growing to wash and shed efficiency to pastured poultry processes to building your farm and buying the right property. One of the resources I want to highlight is our Profitable Farmers Toolkit. Now, this is something that's been downloaded by over 3,000 farmers. It's a free resource. It contains tips for setting up your farm, financial systems and apps that you can use to track your farm, our favorite tools for the greenhouse, field, and washing shed, innovative apps for farming, and how to put automated systems in place to make your farm run more efficiently. So if you haven't already, pop on over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download it today. So we're back with Dan. Dan, you farm with several partners, the cooperative, now it's 7. How do you divide roles on the farm? How does it, how do you make that all work?
Well, I'll break it down for you. Can you tell me if it's too complicated?
Okay.
But, so at the base, there's the co-op members.
Yep.
And so we currently have 7.
Yep.
And each member has a vote at the annual members meeting. So this is a once a year meeting, and this is where the real power of the members have. And their ultimate power is to elect a board of directors.
Okay.
So right now, our board of directors has 7 places on it. So all 7 members are on the board of directors. So it's a little bit like the same people. But as we accept new members, we're going to cap it to 7 directors on the board. So there will be co-op members who aren't on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you got to stop somewhere to be able to talk to each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so the board of directors, they tackle the big picture stuff. And they meet once a month. And in the fall, they meet more often for like about once a week for about 2 months to just kind of plan out. But the board of directors, they set the policies and decisions how the co-op works, and they set the big goals for the coming year. But they don't do the actual management. We've broken the farm into 6 departments. Each department has a department director, and we made a mistake choosing the term department director because we also have directors on the board of directors, and those are not the same directors.
Okay.
So I'll call them department directors to try to keep that clear.
Yep.
So each department director, they manage their whole department. And so they're the person who guides what's going on in there, and they've been empowered by the board to do that. So on our farm, Fred and I, we're co-directors for the marketing and communication department. I focus on seed marketing. He focuses on veg marketing.
Okay.
I'm the department director for the seed operations department. So that's the department that grows the seed and then like packs it and ships it. Emily runs the vegetable harvest department. So she gets the stuff out of the ground and sends it off to CSA. Renee runs the crop production department. So that's everything from, the moment seeds arrive to the farm, through the greenhouse, into the field, up to the point where they're going to be harvested. She runs that. Reed runs the infrastructure and machinery. So maintaining and also creating new things. And then Fred, who does the co-marketing with me, he also runs the finances and admin. So, dealing with taxes and the government and all that paperwork.
Yeah.
So those are the 6 departments. Then we have staff in each department. Some of those staff are in multiple departments, but we try to think like when they're in a specific department, they report to that director. And sometimes we have, directors from another department. If I'm working in the crop production department, I become staff under Renee. And then also in those departments, in addition to just workers, we also have people who have managerial roles. So like in the crop production department, we do have an irrigation manager. We have a transplant manager. We have a number of other managers. So Renee leads those people. So she sets the big picture, but they're the ones who carry it out. And then we do have protocols and we have job descriptions now for them, but they have a certain degree of independence in how they do things, as long as it's kind of fitting that larger goal. So just to kind of recap, there's the members that elect the board of directors. The board of directors together really sets the big vision for the farm. And then they delegate parts of that vision to each different department. And in the department, there's a department director who is in charge and has a lot of responsibility to make that happen with their team of staff and managers underneath them.
I just sketched that out. So yes, I got how that all works. That's very cool. Now, obviously, disagreement might come up. Obviously, then it would go back to the department head for that department director with the final decision on that, correct?
Yes. And that's where it's really important to be clear about what their job descriptions are. So if it's an irrigation and there desires to be a change in how we irrigate things, ultimately, that's a decision that Renee has the final say on. But it has to be done in a way also that the irrigation manager does feel that they have some input. So it's her job to kind of balance what she knows the priorities are with what the needs are of that person, because you can't compromise that person's needs. And so kind of figure out how to work both together. So there's a lot of communication. But ultimately, if something had to change, that would be at her level. I mean, there is a scenario where if there's a real problem and a department director wasn't doing their job, then I guess the board of directors would have to intervene. But that's something that we really try to work together, so that's not the situation. We don't want to have a workplace that needs interventions of that type.
Correct. And the new co-op members, and all your team, you're properly vetting them before they come on board. So you're knowing that they're already aligned with your values and stuff before they end up being in those positions.
Totally. And sometimes it's not just about being aligned with the values, it's that they have to learn what those values are to enact them.
A lot of your direction has been a result of your holistic management training. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I had read a lot about holistic management early in the farm, and we tried to apply some of it. It's always tough when one person has an idea or they read something and they come back and say, this is the way to do it,
Yeah.
So we had a hard time integrating it. But in our 5th or 6th year, may have been less, I'm not actually sure what year it was, but it's between year 4 and year 6. All the founding members, we got together and we did a holistic management course together. So it was a 6-day course. It was broken into 2 3-day periods. And we got trained in the whole process from, setting your quality of life goals, testing your questions, and through that whole thing. And it was a really transformational process for our farm. And especially at the time when we got there, because we were successful financially, but there was a lot of things we were unhappy with. And we didn't necessarily have the language to talk about it or the way to bring it up. And so this training, by taking so much time to craft, you want your quality of life to be, the way you want to feel, the way you want your workplace to be. By crafting that, we were able to say, well, these things don't quite line up with that. And, we've been farming for 5 or 6 years. We're fairly financially successful. We're well respected. Why is it that we still are having this problem? And it changed our parameters of how we made decisions. Whereas initially we're making decisions to be profitable, suddenly we're making decisions to have a good quality of life. And part of a good quality of life is having good employment. And part of that means profitability. So if we could achieve that quality of life, we would be profitable. So it gave us a new language to speak about things. Now, holistic management has a fantastic tool where there's 7 questions that you ask of any problem or any situation you face, and you test this situation against your goal with these 7 questions, and it really works. Now, I wish we did it all the time, but we seem to do it like twice a year, Like I think the real holistic management pros, they're doing it left and right. But we really pull it out when there's something that we can't decide on. And like we're at a stalemate, we're at loggerheads, and like we have different ideas. And then we'll bring this tool out, and it'll really narrow down to what the concerns are and why it is that we have different perspectives on things. And usually at the end, after going through all the questions, we mostly, like there's like kind of a gut check you do at the end. And at that point, we're usually almost all on board on the same thing. Sometimes there's a big feeling of sadness that comes because some of us have to let go of a really big idea that we had hoped to achieve, but kind of going through it, realizing that maybe it doesn't meet the quality of life that we want. And so there's a whole mourning process that goes with that. But the holistic management framework really lets you, if you use it, it lets you make decisions based on what is the most important thing for you.
Absolutely. And I think obviously if you were farming with, let's say, just your wife, that holistic management process might be different than if you're farming with a 7-member cooperative.
In some regards, I mean, it's easier to talk with one person. You'd hope so. You'd hope. But you still have to have that quality of life, the quality of life statement or goal. When we did that workshop, we had different ideas. Like some of us wanted to farm more small scale. Some wanted to be bigger scale. Some wanted to do this or that. But when we came down to the quality of life statement, we had no disagreement on that. We wanted to have reasonable work schedules. We wanted to have healthy lifestyles. We wanted to be able to eat good food. We wanted to feel engaged creatively. We wanted to be able to make a living, like a good livelihood. Like all these things we're on the same page with. And so it was the strategies that we disagreed with, but not the place that we wanted to get to. And understanding that really helps us have faith in one another, because we realize that when we have a conflict, it's not because the person has an antagonism towards us, but because there's just a different way that they see it getting to the same place. And that's true whether it's just you and one farm partner, it could be a romantic partner or otherwise, or being with a group of people. It's the same thing, that usually that you can get to a common holistic goal that you want to have. And then it's about designing the business that actually gets you there.
Absolutely. So figuring out the strategies that you're going to take to make that reality happen.
Right on.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about beginning farmers. So you've been around, you've seen a lot of them come and go. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see beginning farmers making?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is farmers being too excited and too fast to start their own operation and not taking the time to learn on other farms. And I think this is even more true now. There's so much amazing, solid information out there, like on YouTube, in books, online classes, podcasts like these. Like we've never been in a time where there's more information available. And I'm envious compared to what we had available back then. But I don't think it replaces actual experience. I think it supplements it. And I think it's really important to take your time to learn how to farm before starting your own farm. And so that, like, if you know what kind of farm you want to run, you should go and find the best people who do that kind of farming, and you go work for them for a year or two. So if you want to grow flowers, you work on a flower farm. If you want to do greens, you work with a microgreen producer. If you want to grow seeds, maybe you come and work with us.
Yes.
But you have to have patience and willingness to go work for someone else. If you can even work on a few farms, that's even better. And that'll really, really broaden your horizons. Because I think when you start your own farm, you suddenly lose the opportunity to only be learning. And you have to start performing. And the stress comes in. And there's a lot of things that you can never learn on your own the same way as if you're taught. The biggest difference on farms of people who are self-taught versus well-trained is how they approach harvest. It takes thousands of hours to become a good harvest person. Like you have to get it ingrained into your body. And that's by just bunching kale, cilantro, washing greens. Like you just have to do it over and over and over. And so if you start your own farm and you're trying to develop the system and then master it, you're at a whole different place than if you were taught in by somebody who had solid systems. And when you leave their farm, you have it in your bones and then you can go onto your own farm and you start as a pro. And I think that's the biggest disservice that new farmers do, is not taking the time to actually work on farms.
Yeah, we go for a multi-year education for all these other trades, like even electrical or plumbing. And those are long, arduous apprenticeships. And they're only learning one skill. And so many farmers are doing 12, 15 different things. Plus, as you said, that trying to do that muscle memory of bunching beets, cilantro. So yeah, you see someone who's experienced, every single bunch of cilantro looks exactly the same. But if you've got someone new, it's all over the place. And that's a huge frustration for us on our farm was, those new employees that we like, okay, new employees just don't bunch anymore. Or they're going to sit next to somebody who's going to check every single bunch. But yeah, that's huge. I think I absolutely agree with you.
But if you don't let them bunch, they don't become great bunchers. That's the challenge that we're in as managers.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. So one thing we actually did is we got to the point where on the crate they were harvesting is we took a giant spring clip and then we would make a sample bunch for them and then set that sample bunch on top of that spring clip so they could just see that sample bunch the entire time that they were bunching, and so that they would just make sure that they always held their bunch up to that one to make sure it looked similar.
Yeah. And
then always going back and checking every couple minutes or every 15 minutes is also key on that. But yeah, kind of got off track there on that one. What one strategy or recipe that if farmers and their teams could consistently apply every day would compound into big wins for them? And it may just be you repeating spreadsheets.
Well, I could go the spreadsheet route. If you want a spreadsheet to work, and if you want your farm to work, you got to be clear about what you're trying to do. And it's true at every step. And you have to have a plan for how you're going to do it. And you follow that plan. And if it's not working, you monitor it, and then you change the plan if you need to. And so that's really, really important to be clear about where you're trying to get to and not get caught up like in the metaphorical and literal weeds. So an example might be, let's say you're going to plant a bed of lettuce. So in the greenhouse, you decide to start maybe 30% more plants because you want to have enough plants. And then you plant it out, and maybe you have 200 plants left. And you put so much love and work into those plants, and maybe they look good. And it makes sense to keep them for a week in case there's a problem and you need to replant. But once that bed you planted is doing well, there's no reason to hold on to those lettuce. You got to compost them, or if another farmer that that needs them, pass them on, but don't send somebody to keep watering them all the time. And so the goal is to get lettuce in the ground, not to get beautiful lettuce that's being maintained. And then when you harvest, if you're doing CSA baskets and you have 200 members and you have 240 lettuce heads, harvest 200 lettuce heads. Those extra 40, if you have a market for them, harvest them, but don't waste your time if you're not. And so you really have to be clear about what you're doing. Like that, the more you can bring intention into every decision that you do, the more you will get results of what you were trying to get to.
Wow, that was good. And I think so often farmers don't have that plan, and so they spend all their time running around trying to do all these things, and they haven't even stopped to think, why am I doing these things?
Yeah, and they know what they want. They just haven't taken the time to formulate it.
Absolutely. So you talked about this a bit earlier, the employee part, but challenge so many farms face is finding, hiring, and keeping great teams. Talk to us a little about how you guys have found the best team players.
So the first thing is you need to have a broad enough pool of people to choose from, because you can't be choosy when only one person's applying.
Yes.
At the beginning is we try to make ourselves known in the farming world. We network with all kinds of farmers. We give tours to agricultural schools. If somebody needs to do a stage or an internship for a class, we invite them on. We want people to be aware of us, and we want them to know that we're a good workplace. And so if we can get enough people, then we can be choosy. But even at that point of when you hire, you never know who's the right person is going to be. There's definitely themes that we see. We have found that people who come from the restaurant world, that they know how to work hard and they know how to be a team player. We found that athletes, especially rock climbers, They know how to push themselves and how to be really present. So like those things are good indicators when we see them on a CV or a resume or when we're interviewing. But there's like personality and pleasantness and the capacity to deal with unexpected situations. These are just as important as these other things. And you can't gauge these in an interview. So I think that it's finding the right people is the wrong question. It's how do you keep the right people once you found them? And I think that the way to do that is you have to be an awesome workplace. You got to make people feel valued. You got to look for their feedback. And when they have good feedback, especially critical feedback, you make changes based on their experiences. And you recognize that things are changing because they were able to be part of the process. And you got to be transparent, share your numbers, share your decision making, share when there's stresses, but also successes, and communicate all the decisions that you make. You got to pass on responsibility much more than you think you're willing to let go. And you got to give a lot of freedom to people. And if you do all these things, people want to stay with you. And it's more than just a wage you can pay them. It's the experience that you can give them. And if you can make them be better people by being on your farm, they'll want to stay. And that's a tall order, I recognize.
Yeah.
But when you hire initially, that's just the first step. I think it takes you 1 or 2 months before you know you got a great employee. And that's just how you make sure that they stay. Most of us farmers don't have the cash to hire everybody that shows up. But sometimes I wish I could hire twice as many people as we need so that I could find the diamonds in the rough. Because sometimes you're really, really caught off guard who the best people are.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. So what I'm hearing you say too is your money is not everything, because money does not equal a great quality of life.
That's true, both in terms of like the farm you design, but also what your staff is trying to get for, because like the living is what makes living good, and I didn't even talk about it with the great workplace, but you want your staff to be able to eat good organic vegetables, and it's that quality of life. I don't know if I'm talking to myself. Yeah.
No, that's good. And sometimes it's repeating that actually allows people to hear something and actually internalize it. So sometimes I think that's super important as well. So let's talk about your marketing. What channels are you focusing on? You've got the CSA, you've got the seed business. Those are the two you've mentioned so far. What else are you doing?
Well, I think that's the core of them. With the vegetable business, that we have grown to being a 500-member CSA, and we really love CSA, and we have fantastic members. Some of our older drop-offs have retention rates in the low 80s%. We know these people will be there every year for us, which is why we've really just grown that CSA. And we have a fruit share. Like we buy in organic fruit from other producers, and there's maybe about a quarter of our members get those. We have a flower share where they get bouquets of flowers from our farm. Those members, so they purchase a share of the harvest, and they have whatever, I guess it's $600 or $700 to get the vegetables for the year. But that's not all they eat. So we have the capacity for them to order extra stuff, garlic, roots, also plants for their garden, more fruits that we buy in. So all of that extra really leverages the CSA to a bigger value. So that's the veg part. For the seed business, the online store, where people type in, they choose their varieties, and then we ship them to like standard seed orders. That's kind of the heart of the business. But we also have a big seed rack program. So at this point, I don't know, we're maybe in 70 stores or so and growing. And so that's kind of like a wholesale business, where people are signing up for a full rack with like 60 or 120 varieties. And it's been interesting with the seed because, for a long time, the online store was more important. And then the seed rack business has grown. But in the last year, or even recent months, I would say, our online store is suddenly growing in a way that I didn't expect, especially as we put more care into interacting with the clients. So those are the core marketing pieces that we have, and it keeps us busy.
I can imagine. Yeah. So where do you spend your time and effort in promotion? So you said you're seeing more growth in the online store. How are you interacting with people? How are you advertising?
In the seeds, I think our biggest thing is we have a weekly newsletter. That's one of the things I write at 4 a.m. every morning, or not every morning, but a couple days a week. I try to create awesome content that people are going to want to share with their friends. So, I really explain how you grow a crop, what's special about it, if we've bred something, like how we bred it. Like I try to get technical in a way that normal gardeners can really appreciate. And then we send it to our newsletter subscribers, but we also post it on Facebook, and we try to leverage it through different social media. And we really see that it's driven traffic and building the base of people. So I think that, like, for the seeds, it's really been the weekly newsletter that's been really important. Vegetables is a little bit different. I think the number one thing with the vegetables is word of mouth of our current members. They fully understand our format. They understand what CSA is. They know what they're going to get. So they are the best ambassadors to explain to someone else what a CSA basket is. Whereas if somebody gets a postcard in the mail and joins our basket, they're buying for certain reasons, but maybe the wrong ones. And we might not last a second year. So when we find the members who are recruited by other members are the ones that are the most solid. So we'll give members a gift certificate. I don't know if it's $10 or maybe $20 for each member each referral that they give that signs up. And we ask them to communicate with their people. We send them ideas of things they could post on Facebook, but we really just try to engage them to spread the word. And so I think these weekly newsletters and this word of mouth are kind of the foundation of our marketing. The next thing might be Facebook. Like, we are on Instagram, but I find Facebook is where there's a higher level of engagement. So we're very present there.
Very cool. Very cool. If you could pick one, moving on, what would be your favorite farming tool?
My favorite farming tool, I think I'm going to go with spreadsheets, specifically Google Sheets.
Okay.
I love these.
Okay. Now, with Google Sheets, are there any plugins that you use, or are you just using the basic Google Sheets?
I use some plugins, but I've actually moved away from plugins. I've just been a little bit afraid of compromising our Gmail accounts. We used to use plugins, but we've moved away from the plugins just to kind of keep the core spreadsheet intact and not compromise our Google account by giving access to other developers. Google Sheets really lets you work collaboratively, and everyone can see the documents and they can be editing it without it affecting somebody else. And even without getting to plugins, there are so many spreadsheet functions that let you link things together and let you make data do all kinds of things. And I don't think most people know what spreadsheets can do with just a couple more skills than they have, which is why I'm launching the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm probably going to sign up just for that one thing, so you can teach me how to do the cool things with spreadsheets that I don't know yet. So, yeah.
More than willing to.
So let's talk about varieties, because I know you're in the seed business. Any favorite varieties that have come up recently, or still your all-time favorites?
It's hard to choose from all your children.
Yes.
But there's a Tat Soy that we've been breeding for about 10 or 12 years, where we crossed some Tat Soy and some Yukina Savoy with some purple leaves that we got from Wild Garden Seed. And so we've been stabilizing what we call a Rainbow Tat Soy. And it's probably the thing I'm most in love with. And especially, like, it's been great developing it as a summer crop, but now in the last few years, we're working as a winter crop, and it is so purple. It's really amazing. So that's one variety that I rant about. There's also two peppers I really love. There's one called Karma and Gatherer's Gold. So they're Italian types, like a little bit smaller than like Carmen. Or like a small Carmen, I would say.
Yes.
But they're open pollinated. They're both bred by Frank Morden of Wild Garden Seed. And so we've been growing them for a number of years. And though I do love Carmen, I love Escamillo, I really love these two also. I find they've been more forgiving in sometimes extreme heat or in situations that'll compromise other reliable peppers. We're not actually offering these varieties yet, but we've gotten permission from Frank to start producing the seeds ourselves. So we're looking forward to distributing some of it in the 2020.
Cool. So with the purple, you said it's a Tat Soy?
Yep.
So do you like growing that as like a head, or more for baby greens, or what's your favorite use of that?
It has been more as a head, kind of like a bok choy type thing. It's big. It's a bigger type. It can be used as a salad green for sure. It has the flavor. The color kind of can get lost in a summer salad mix, but in the winter, the purple really is visible.
Gotcha.
I think it's a fantastic winter green or winter purple.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you need that color during the winter time. Yeah. All right. And so one final question here. Do you believe that now is the best time to be starting to farm? And if so, why?
I do think it is the best time to start farming. I guess part of it is there's never been so much solid farming information available, and especially in the small farm space. So I think it's really, really exciting to have that. And marketing, from a certain perspective, has never been easier. With social media and online platforms, you can reach just about anybody that you want to. And so that's really exciting. But I think the flip side of it being the best time to start farming is there's so many people starting to farm. So it can mean there's a lot of farms in the same space. And it's really, really easy to see them as competition. And I think if you focus on exactly the same marketing opportunities, it's really frustrating and hard to make a space for yourself. But like small local farms, like we're only feeding a couple % of the marketplace. There is so much more room for farmers to be feeding more people. So I think that the challenge now is to finding those new markets and new ways to reach those clients and how to convert new people to eating the kind of food that we're growing, like the great food that we're growing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but we have to work for it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And kind of, even I was mentioning to you earlier before we started recording, the farm that we're looking to start here locally is we've got some great local CSA farms already. 2 of them, less than 10 minutes away, and another one 20 minutes south of us. So when we started thinking about that, we don't want to compete there. So what it came back to for us is we really want to create a local town farm where we're focused, yes, on selling vegetables, but it's going to be more of a roadside stand with agritourism aspects, with a community kind of hub for our town, and really focus on that aspect instead of, do the whole farmers market CSA and being direct competition for the other farms in the area. So obviously we're going to see how it works. I think with where we're located, we have massive opportunities. And I think the other aspect is we live in Ohio, which is not the best place, let's say, to start a CSA. Let's say you're instead of like Portland or, the Hudson Valley where people are more familiar with that. So I think our goal is to kind of tap into those people who might not be willing to sign up for a CSA, but are willing to bring their kids to a farm that maybe offers something for them to do first before they have to then, buy something. So that's kind of the take we're taking. Obviously, we'll see in a couple of years how it works. But I think you're absolutely correct that if we keep trying to do the exact same thing as everyone else, it's going to be very challenging and we're going to fail fast.
Yeah, I think that approach that you have is the perfect one to have. And that's important for all new farmers to have.
Yeah, you can't just keep doing the same thing and expect it to work. You're right. The market is there is only a certain amount of people who are going to be willing to do this sort of thing.
Yeah. But all these people, most eaters want good food and they want to feed their family good food. They just might not know how good it can be. You're
right. And I think so many times as farmers, we end up making buying from us kind of complicated.
Yes.
So the way, this morning, I had a conversation with a guy who's building an app that allows pretty much anyone to, from their phone, order food from their local farmer. And, we got to talking about, he says, yeah, these are the people that don't go to farmers markets because it's too much work. He says, they want to have a couple cups of coffee and just sit on their phone and order their food. And either you figure out how you're going to deliver it to their house or they have a centralized pickup point. But, that kind of thing, I think, is going to get a lot of traction because the crazy schedules that consumers live.
Yeah. It's exciting times.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. Just, 12 years ago, that would not have been possible.
No, it wouldn't.
So, yeah, we do live in exciting times. Well, with that, Dan, thank you again so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you again so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Also, thank you for launching this new podcast in the farmer space. I've been really enjoying reading it. So it's an honor to be among the guests that you've featured so far or are featuring.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, Dan. You're someone I've looked up to. And, we really started farming about the same time because our first season was that 2004, 2005 season. So we've kind of grown our farms until we stopped farming 2015, kind of alongside of each other and always been looking back. What were we, 4 or 5 hours apart?
Yeah, just around Albany, I think.
Yeah, we're about an hour and a half north of Albany. So I think we're 3 hours from the border. You're only 20 or 30. So maybe 3.5 hours apart. Well, great to have you on, Dan, and best of luck with this growing season.
Thank you.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend,